Hey, well, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for attending this meeting. And long story short, it is January 29th, 2024. I had given this training earlier on in the day, but I forgot to hit record for the live streaming. And so I'm going to be giving the training one more time. Um, this session is probably going to be a little bit shorter than what we did earlier today, because earlier today we had the capabilities of live questions and more demonstrations and things like that. Um, but that's okay. The reason why I'm recording this session is in order to you can have this as a recording and as a reference. And so I'm going to this, like I said, this is probably gonna be a little bit quicker than what we did earlier today, but that's okay. This is for you to be able to go back and kind of read and review. But the title of the session is Zoom 101 for Parliamentarians, and it was sponsored by the Virginia State Association of Parliamentarians and the Parliamentary Law Club of Richmond, Virginia. Because my name is Donald Garrett, I'm the VSP president, and one of our units had said, we really want some training on how to do a meeting in Zoom. And I said, well, you know what? Let's just let's just take that and kill two birds with one stone. I'll give you the training, but I'll give it to other people too. We can get some CEU credits and whatnot for it and call it a day. And so this session, again, is really designed to kind of walk step by step, 1, 2, 3, on how to use Zoom for meetings and how it all matches up with Robert's Rules of Order. I'm Donald Garrett. I'm a professional registered parliamentarian, and especially starting in 2020 when we had the COVID-19 pandemic, I ended up helping out a lot of groups convert their meetings and elections and whatnot to be compliant under Roberts and other regulations and statutes, help them to convert those in-person meetings into electronic. And so even outside of that, I've been on the Standing Rules Committee for the NAP convention for the past two conventions where we had either use electronic software or we met completely virtually. And so hopefully I'm going to use those experiences today to help educate you on how to use Zoom. And just for an overview, a quick overview of today's session, we're going to first talk about how electronic meetings are actually authorized, and then we're going to go step by step in Zoom, talking about the interface, quorum, and the process of getting recognized to make a motion and how you do voting and whatnot, some advanced options, and then actually setting up a meeting in the Zoom, followed by some tips and tricks. So, quick little rule and disclaimers. If you see R1R, I'm talking about the latest edition of Robert's Rules of Order, newly revised. And on one slide, I do mention a statute or two. And so I am not an attorney, so nothing in this presentation should be construed as legal advice. This is a re-recording, so I don't know if the CEUs apply. You'll have to message me directly if you want to get CEU credit, because this is only approved for people who attended live. And so for asynchronous, you might need to message me. We can work something else out. And the session is being recorded, but because this is the re-recording, I'm the only one here. Like I said, this is meant to be a reference. So throughout the presentation, if you need to stop this and rewind and listen again, or while you're setting up a meeting, you want to go through and stop and follow along, that's okay. That's why this is nice and recorded in that format for you. So before we talk about what a electronic meeting is, we have to take it a step backwards and actually talk about the definition of a meeting. And so that's going to be contained in Section 8 of R1R. And the book says that a meeting is a single official gathering of members in one room or area to transact business. And that's really, really key there, because the authorship team for Roberts takes a conservative approach to what constitutes a meeting. If you see that highlighted section, it says room or area. That means there's a geographic component related to that meeting that you have. And so it's a room or area, there's a physical component, and they say even one of the fundamental principles of parliamentary procedure is that meetings organization action can only happen at meetings, or people who are present at that meeting voting can make that action happen, essentially. And so they really have that physical component, and really that face-to-face interaction is kind of interspersed throughout the book. when they're talking about debate and everything, right? You're there physically be able to listen to your other members before you make a decision how you're going to vote on something. And again, in the next section, section 9, the book continues that says, except as authorized in the bylaws, business of an organization can only be transacted validly at a meeting, which is a single official gathering room or area. So again, in the next section, Roberts also is again adding in that physical component to what it means to be a meeting and where you use parliamentary procedure. So we know what a meeting is now. So what's an electronic meeting? So in section 9, it goes on to say that it defines electronic meeting as meetings at which, rather than all members being physically present in one room or area, some communicate with each other through electronic means like the internet or telephone. And so it's important to note that the authorship team, RO&R, they treat electronic meetings as exceptions to the definition of a meeting. And so it's a little awkward because it's almost like a negative definition, right? An electronic meeting is a meeting that's not like a meeting. But again, because they treat it as an exception, that's the reason why it needs to be authorized in your bylaws, because essentially what Robert says is you can only do votes and motions at a meeting. If you want to do something else, supersede us and put it in your bylaws, right? And so because you are pretty much doing something other than the default of an in-person meeting, that's why Roberts says that you need to put it in your bylaws to authorize it, because you are superseding the Roberts Rules of Order definition of a meeting. And so it's really important to note again that electronic meetings are exceptions to that standard meeting definition, which is requiring one room or area. In the next paragraph, the book continues that if your electronic meetings are going to be authorized, it's advisable to adopt additional rules pertaining to their conduct. And we're going to talk about that. Throughout today, and you'll actually see how a lot of what you can do under Roberts, you can kind of do by default under Zoom, and you don't need a special rule for every single thing. And so throughout the presentation, I'll kind of point out different things where you might want a special rule and where you might not want one, or how it just kind of already relates to Roberts, and you just keep doing what you're doing. So authorizing the electronic meetings, again, Robert says needs to be authorized in your bylaws because you are superseding our definition of what a meeting is. And the main exception, though, too, is if you are in Virginia and you are incorporated, or you are like a homeowners association or a condominium association, the statutes generally actually give you the authority to hold electronic meetings regardless. The Condo Act, for example, states that unless your governing documents expressly provide otherwise, you can hold meetings electronically. So, and because state law supersedes what's in bylaws and Robert's Rules of Order, you follow what the state law says first. And so in Virginia, at least, if you're incorporated or like an HOA or a condo association, you probably already have the authorization that you need. But again, if you're ever like serving on those clients, remember we're parliamentarians, not lawyers. Those groups probably have general counsel that you can just run past and get their opinion on something. So fear not, but just note that every single state in DC has their own Condo Act, has their own HOA Act, has their own Corporation Act, and so it differs like state to state. But you also want to look there too to see if there's wiggle room for already having authorization to do your electronic meetings. So what is Zoom? Zoom is a software that launched in 2013. And by 10 years later, 2023, that last year, they had over $4 billion in revenue. That is a lot of money, $4 billion. Zoom provides video telephony software through things like meetings, chat messaging, voice calls, virtual events, conference rooms, etc. I will say, in my anecdotal experience, most groups who do electronic meetings do use Zoom. It's a very popular platform. It's user-friendly and easy to use. You'll see Teams meetings, but most of the time that's going to be for like workplaces because they're kind of already using the Microsoft Office subscriptions and Teams as part of that. Whereas most volunteer groups, people don't have Office, Microsoft for all the members of the association, right? And so Zoom doesn't really require you to have a certain or special like login or relationship with the IT to use. So a lot of people have been using Zoom. And that's not to say that if your group uses something else like Google Meets or GoToWebinar and whatnot, that's okay. Just note that I'm teaching you Zoom today, and all you have to do is pause the video and go to Google and search, go to a meeting, how to do polling, right? And then like you can kind of take the equivalent. And so I'm introducing to you a bunch of different topics today, right? And you can find the equivalent one by doing a quick Google search. But Zoom's website is zoom.us, and we're going to talk about that very soon and why that's important as well too. But yeah, they they really blew up during the pandemic. They became very, very popular. I mean, because they offer everything from like telehealth to meetings and webinars and whatnot. And so Zoom is the platform we're talking about today, and it's the platform this is being recorded in. So like I said, there are so many different software packages that they offer, but the two main plans for Zoom meetings is their free plan, and then there's the Zoom Pro, which is the lowest paid option. So for that free plan, if it's just two people in a meeting, so one-to-one, you can have a limited number of those meetings for whatever duration that you want. But as soon as you add in that third person, that's when your meetings are only limited to 40 minutes under the free version. If you do recording of your meeting, you can only record it as a local file, but you still have the basic features like screen sharing, breakout rooms, and virtual backgrounds like I have on for me right now. Also, there's a 100 attendee max for the free plan. So with the free plan, the main downside is if you have a meeting of, three or more people, which most meetings are, it's only for 40 minutes. And so after 40 minutes hits, it literally kicks you out and then you have to like join the link like again and whatnot. And for most groups, that's just like not feasible. It's kind of weird to deal with and everything. Some people will do that to save some money, but what you'll see on the right-hand side is in Zoom Pro, they charge you about $16 a month, which I think is not a bad deal. You can contact them too and see if they offer you like a nonprofit discount. They do that sometimes. But basically, instead of 40 minutes for your meeting, it gives you 30 hours limit for your meetings of three or more. I can't think of any meeting that would go longer than 30 hours straight, other than like a US Congress or like an all-night dance marathon fundraiser, right? So I think most meetings are okay within that 30-hour limit. But in addition to the free plan doesn't offer this. What the pro plan does, it actually offers you dialing into the meeting, so someone can access the meeting audio through their telephone. And so that's really key for people who might not be the best with technology, but they still want to participate. They can still dial in with their cell phone to get the meeting audio. For recording, it offers local and cloud storage. So you can actually send your recording straight to the Zoom cloud for easy link sharing and whatnot. And it offers the same features like screen sharing, virtual backgrounds, breakout rooms. But in addition, the Pro plan is really cool because it allows for the polling feature, which is great for doing some voting. You can stream your meetings, so you can either stream this on Facebook Live, you can send it straight to YouTube, etc. And you can have co-hosts. And co-hosts are they're concurrent hosts to the main meeting host. And so under the free plan, you can only have one host. But then if you you have to switch it to only one person can be the host at a time. So you have to switch it to a different person depending on what you have going on in your meeting. Whereas for the Zoom Pro plan, I can be a host and I can appoint other co-hosts to help me out with some of the hosting activities. Um, and so it also has the 100 attendee max, but you can always buy more to increase the cap of how many people can attend your meetings and whatnot. But if you pay for it annually, it's $160, which will save you it's like what, 20% discount thereabout. And so depending on how much you use it, if you meet with different groups as a practicing parliamentarian, I have a Zoom Pro license because sometimes it's easier for me to tell my groups like, hey, don't worry about it. I'll send out the Zoom link, right? You can kind of provide a service that way as well too. So I mean, also, if you kind of partner, if that's a lot of money for your individual like budget, you can partner with other organizations and maybe like another local unit in your NAP area, and you can kind of cost share, right? Because if as long as you don't meet at the same time, you can use the license when someone else is not using the license. So that's an option you have as well. So when you have your meeting, your Zoom meeting set up, there are going to be four main ways to access it. The first way is the primary way, which is the way they kind of want you to do, which is through the computer application. And so what happens with that is when you when you click a link to get into Zoom, it's going to ask you, do you want to download Zoom? And then you just download Zoom, and congratulations, you're in the app and you're in the meeting. The computer application has all the options, and it's the number one view to see everything that the Zoom people want you to be able to see. Um, Number two is a mobile app option, which you can get the app on like your mobile phone, your smartphone, your tablet. It has some of the features, but it's sometimes it's hard to navigate. Like you might have to touch your screen to make things appear or swipe like a few times in order to get to the right view and everything. But the mobile app is also an option that's kind of created by Zoom. If just in case, I mean, sometimes people are on like a work computer or like a public computer or a government computer, and they're not allowed to download particular software. And so you can also access Zoom through your web browser, like your Edge, Firefox, Chrome, whatever you use. It has less capabilities, but that's still a way of accessing the meeting. And then also there are ways you can access the meeting by dial-in only. But again, that's only for the audio. Some people will attend the meeting by audio only, but to me by audio only, but they might not have full access. They can't see what's going on. They might have issues voting should that occur. So when you have your access to your meeting, the first thing when we're talking about meetings in Robert's Rules of Order is you have to have your quorum, right? And so your quorum is your minimum number of people who have to be present in order for it to be a valid meeting. And it's a presiding officer's job to count to see if there is enough people present for it to be a quorum. Um, Something that's really helpful is that when you're logged into Zoom, Zoom does the counting for you. When you see the participants number, there's a number next to it that says how many people are logged in to that meeting. And that's really, really great because it's a great aid to the presiding officer. You can do your quick math and see that's enough people present who at the meeting. A few things to watch out for, though. It's only a basic count of how many accounts like log into a meeting, right? And so something to watch out for example, is like, let's say there's a married couple that shares the same computer. It might be spouse one and spouse two, both on the same web camera, right? But there are actually two people present at the meeting for quorum purposes. And so you might run into that, or if there's someone has a personalized link, and they share the link to someone else, they might show up there twice. So you might need to rename someone, right? So that they're able to say who exactly they are and everything. So you can get like a more accurate count. But again, a lot of the times for quorum, Zoom's doing the basic count for you. That should get you about 90% of the way there. It's that other 10% that are things to kind of watch out for when you're determining if you have enough people present at that meeting. And something to kind of think about, which we really don't think about it too often when we're meeting in person, but when we're meeting in person, we have internal controls that we've developed that ensure that we have reasonable assurance that our meeting's only being accessed by people who are eligible to be at that meeting. And what do I mean by that? Like, let's say, I mean, you're at your monthly meeting and there's a strange man there and no one's ever seen him there before. What do? Hey, is this your first time here? Right? By you ask that simple question, that's actually a verification question to see who is this man and what is he doing here, right? He might respond, "Oh, I'm so and so's husband, and I never really go. This is my first meeting." Or, "Yeah, I mean, I joined a few years ago, but work got in the way, but got a new job now, so now I can attend the meeting." Oh, okay. Like, with those pieces of information, you can tell that okay, if he's someone that's like on the membership list, his story checks out, he's good to go. Or maybe you might just be waiting for the spouse to come so you can like kind of see that, okay, yeah, they are married to someone who actually is a more active member. So those are just like little checks that you do. Um, Because I mean, I think a lot of the times the main question that kind of pops up is like, well, how do you do our meeting this like safe and secure? And my message to you is you can do a lot of the same things that you would do for your basic in-person meeting. Like we can do the equivalent in Zoom. What do I mean by that? So number one, meeting links only being provided to registered members. That's the same thing as just telling only members where the meeting's going to happen, right? You're like, okay, we're at room 3 of the library next week, right? That's the same thing as just emailing out the meeting link if we've only distributed it to people who are on a need-to-know basis. Um, some groups will do more publishing, right? And they will try to get more attendees to go out there. But again, the same risk that you run into having someone random come to your in-person meeting, it's the same risk of someone random coming into your Zoom meeting, right? So it's sort of the same thing. Next, you have some visual or audio verification. Again, if I see like a random name in there, I might like this chat with them. Hey, so and so, who are you? Right? Or hey, Susan, is that you? And then they're going to unmute and say hi back. You recognize their voice. That's just a quick same audio verification. Same thing as like seeing someone in person, just to double check that they are who they say they are. Other things you can do is not reuse your links. You can use passwords in your meeting and whatnot and switch the passwords up so that people can have that as a security setting for their meetings. And again, just ensuring that names are correct, right? And so if sometimes people will go in as like iPhone, it's like, no, 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 I need your real name in this meeting, right? Make sure the name is correct. It's almost the same thing as passing out little name badges at a meeting, right? What's your name again? So those are just like little things that we kind of do subconsciously for in-person meetings, and that's the equivalent of what it would happen, what it would look like in your Zoom meetings. So this is a copy of the Zoom screen. And so what we'll see, if you look at that main black background area, that's sort of like the stage, right? And that's where you can kind of see everyone's cameras, who has their cameras on, people who were inside of that meeting. And if you look at my little photo, there is a little green box around me that just shows that I'm the active speaker there at that time. And so if you ever need to know who's like speaking, it'll show up kind of right there, and you can kind of see everyone who's in the meeting. To the right-hand side is a participants menu, and that's where you're going to see everyone's name who's in the meeting. If you kind of look at the icons, there's a little microphone icon and a camera icon. Red means off, black means on. So you can see all the red ones means off. Everyone's like muted. Lots of people have their microphones muted, but then you kind of see the cameras have the black or gray text going. Sorry, the black or gray color going. That means their camera is actually turned on. And when you're the host in the meeting, you can kind of click to the right of people's names, and the options are going to show up that you can do to individual options for and single persons like access to the meeting and them in the meeting, right? So if I need to unmute someone or mute someone, I'll go right to their name. If I need to kick them out and put them into the waiting room, it's next to their name. If I want to pin their video for everyone else for it to be their main video, it's next to their name. You use the participants menu to do that. And then at the bottom, and then on the next slide, I'm going to have it blown up. You can see that is the toolbar, and that's sort of your main cool tool thing that you have in your Zoom. So with your toolbar, I'm going to go over the sort of the main ones that we have here. If you look at the first one, this is mute. That's the microphone icon for mute or unmute. And that is going to how you people able to hear you or not hear you in the meeting. And if you see that it's green and it's kind of going up and down, that means your microphone is picking up sound for your meeting, and it's picking up the sound at least. Next is video. It's a little camera icon. You're going to click that to either start or stop your video so people can see you in the Zoom meeting. Now, if you notice next to both the microphone and the video camera, there's a small little caret icon like right next to it. And that small little caret icon is going to bring up other settings, right? To where I can pick a different camera or a different microphone. Like let's say I have a headset in and I want to speak through my headset and not my built-in microphone on my laptop. I would click that little caret next to the mute button and pick the different audio device or the camera or the different camera, etc. That's also if you want to dial into the meeting and have your phone be your audio, you would click that little caret next to it and select the phone option. Sometimes people might have multiple cameras to their computer, and if they say, "Oh, I don't see where anyone's on my camera," they might have a second camera, or their primary camera might be covered up by something, right? That's not going to work because of the virtual background. But a lot of times they can, if they pick a different camera, it'll start working again. The fourth one is participants, and that's going to bring up that participants pane that we just talked about in that last slide. Then two more after that, you see chat. Chat is in order to send direct messages or use the chat feature, which I don't recommend too much in meetings, and we'll talk about that very soon, but that's there for you too. And the last one I'll point out is the reactions menu. And that's really important because that's going to allow you to raise your hand or have other reactions in your meeting. And if you look towards the end where it says more, the other key here is if you don't see what you're looking for in your menu options, if you click the more button, a lot of times it will pop up for you under more. And so that's why that's important in order to be able to see if be able to find what menu option that you might be looking for your meeting. Okay. So now we're armed with that knowledge. I'm going to go back to our Robert's Rules of Order. And after, you access your meeting, something that's also important to do in your meeting is obtain the floor, right? The chairperson is the one who is going to select who has the floor, but there's different ways to request having the floor, both in Roberts and how you would do it in Zoom. So number one is orally, right? And orally during your meeting, you're just saying, Madam President, Mr. Chairman, whoever the presiding officer is, you're just saying it, their title, and then they're going to point on you, right? They're going to select you or say your name and say that you have the floor. So if you're going to do that in Zoom, literally all you have to do is unmute your microphone and say, Mr. President, or whatever the title of the presiding officer is. No special rules needed. You're just orally saying it. You just do that by unmuting yourself and saying it. So again, if this is something you want to pause, if you're in Zoom right now, you want to pause and try it out for yourself. You can pause this video and find that little microphone cue, and then you just talk in the meeting, right? Next, Roberts also allows you to raise your hand in some instances to seek recognition from the floor. And there are two ways to do that. Number one is to literally raise your hand, right? So with your camera on, just literally raise your hand and wait for the presiding officer to call on you. The other way to do it is to use the reactions menu and say, raise your hand. And so I'm not sure, it's probably not going to pop up because I'm doing like a recording right now. But when you have your hand raised, it shows up for the anyone who is like a host. They can kind of see that your hand is being raised in that meeting. And then so they can kind of be able to point at you, or not point at you, kind of say your name to give you recognition that you have the floor. Another way to get recognition is to type in the chat. I don't really recommend that because it gets kind of messy because chat gets like really cluttered that way. But that's something that you would need a special rule of order for, because that is not addressed in Robert's Rules of Order at all. So once you obtain the floor, what are you going to do next? You're going to make your motion. And so again, section 4 in Roberts talks about to make a main motion, you have to obtain the floor when no other business is pending, and then you can make your motion. Another key thing to point out is in that same section, it says that the chair, either in the chair's own initiative or at the secretary's request, can require that any main motion, amendment, or instructions to a committee be made in writing before he states the question. right? And so by default, under Roberts, you can make people type their motions into the chat because you, as the chair, you have the ability to require it to be in writing. So you can say, put that in the chat for me. So make sure I'm reading your motion correctly. You have that authority, no special rule needed, right? So again, you're going to obtain the floor. Mr. President, okay, chair recognizes Donald. I move to da 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 da. That's all. That's what you can do using your Zoom and everything. Another tip I want to share with you, though, is when you are considering the motions that you're making, right, you can use your share screen function to share a blank Word document, for example, and use that to make sure everyone's on the same page about what motion is actually being made. And so to do that, you would just click that green share screen button, and then you can either select your entire window or you can select a particular like application that you want to share. And in this instance, I would just share like my window. I would just do like a Word document, right? This is just a blank Word document. And then I would just type in there, let's say my resolution, my motion was that membership dues for 2025 be $100, right? And so now that we have this Word document up, we all can see what's going on, right? The chair can repeat it, and then they can open up the floor for debate, right? Are you ready for the question? And then, like, let's say during the debate, someone wants to offer like an amendment, right? Well, another key thing that you can do is if you're using Microsoft Word, you can go under the review menu and go to track changes. And let's say someone makes a motion. Well, I move to amend the pending motion by striking out 2015 and inserting 2017. So you would highlight 2025, right? And then you would type in 2017. And so in that instance, you can see that you can see the before language, the language should be struck out, and the language should be inserted. And you can use track changes to keep track of your amendments and whatnot. And then if it's adopted, you can just kind of right click it and then accept that change. So you're going to accept the insertion and you're going to accept the deletion, right? So you can kind of do that in your Zoom meeting. And that's just really easy. That's just opening up like a little Word document and typing it in. So yeah, sharing a screen is really cool. It's a great tool to use to make sure everyone's on the same page, or if you're like reviewing like an extensive document, we can all be on the same page, like page 5 at the same time. So I don't have to be flipping back on my paper copy. I can just focus in on the electronic meeting itself. So for debate, really quickly, again, you're just going to follow the same Zoom procedure for recognition from the floor. So whatever you decide to use, that's what you're going to use in order to get recognition from the chair so you can debate a debatable motion. One thing I will note is that debating in your chat feature is not really going to be correct under Roberts because remember, under Roberts, only one person could speak at a time, right, as directed by the chair. And so if you have multiple people kind of talking at the same time, that's equivalent to a side conversation. And that is not the sort of ordered and structured debate that Roberts wants you to have for your meetings. And so that's why that whole recognition from the chair piece is really, really important to make sure that your floor is nice and controlled and everyone's paying attention to the person who's speaking at a time during the debate. So when it comes to voting, here are a couple of votes that you can do in your Zoom. The first one is a voice vote, right? And that's when the chair asks those in favor to say aye and those opposed to say no. Unfortunately, I don't have the recording from earlier, right? But the main downside to that is, I mean, that can be easily done. The chair can just ask everyone to kind of say that, right? But there's going to always be like a little delay. The chair is going to say, all those in favor say aye. People can unmute aye, 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 aye. You're like, okay. Those opposed say no. No, 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 no. It's like a little delay. So it's actually kind of hard to see which one's louder than the other. And so in that instance, I mean, you could do a voice vote for non-controversial things, but if it's something that's going to be kind of repeated, if it's something that's going to have a lot of yes votes and no votes, you're going to need to use a more accurate vote count, but the technology makes that easy to do. While we're still on oral voting, though, if you do want to do a roll call vote, that's really easy. You're just unmuting your microphone like one at a time, and someone's going to call each person and kind of go down and see how they vote. Right. And so that way it takes a longer time. But if you're like on a small board, like a board of directors, like 5 or 9, sometimes it's actually easier to do a roll call vote. And also if like one of those 9 people are on the Zoom only by their phone, that is a method of voting that they can do because they can unmute themselves and see what their vote is. And so roll call votes, even though they're not really popular in Roberts, it's definitely an option when you're meeting electronically or by the phone and whatnot, and give you an accurate count and not take up too much of your time. The next type of voting would be a rising vote or a show of hands vote, and that is the chair is going to direct people to use the raise hands feature on Zoom, right? Remember we talked about that in the previous slide. Under the reactions menu, you're going to say raise your hand. So the chair would say, those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand, and then wait for all the hands to come up. And then the admin, the host, has to lower all the hands, and then you say those opposed, please raise your hands, and then you kind of count those. And the key there is when you're the meeting host, if you look at this little picture to the right hand side, you can kind of see at the bottom left, or it says 27 hands were raised. And so that's a cool thing that Zoom does for you is if you're the host, at least, it will count the number of hands raised for you. So you don't have to you don't have to do all that extra math. You can just kind of go down and count. You can just kind of go down and see what the count is, and then it gives you like an accurate count for the number of Zoom hands raised. Now, remember, it's the same downside that you have if people are sharing the same computer and things like that. Those are all things to kind of keep in mind, just depending on what your vote threshold ends up being. And then finally, Zoom has a Zoom polling feature, which I recommend can be used for basic questions, right? Like your yes, no's, or electing one person to one position. And unfortunately, since I can't do the live demonstration, what I'm going to do is I'm going to let me find this video I was looking at earlier. Let's see if I can find it again. Just got it up. There it is. No, it's not. Give me 1 second. There we go. It's loading. And yeah, because it's a okay, yeah. So I'll show you soon how you would actually like set this up as like a Zoom host. Um, there we go. Okay. So this is what it would look like. It's kind of looks like this, which is and so instead of like product features on there, right? Imagine if it was like on the pending question, like yes, no, and if that was like what the motion was, right? And so you kind of get the yeses and the nos, and you get the vote results. So a key of what happens is when you share the results, everyone else, they're only going to see the percentages, right? Whereas the host is able to see both the number of votes and the percentages. And so what's really important for us as parliamentarians is to remember that sometimes there's rounding involved. And so if you have something that requires a 2/3 vote, don't just rest assured that it's a 66% or 67%, right? You actually need to redo the math of the whole numbers to make sure it's truly a 2/3 vote. Because what you don't want to happen is for it to be off by like 1 or 2 because of the rounding errors. And so that's why it's important to make sure if you're like the host and whatnot, or you work with the host to get what the actual raw numbers were, because that's what the Zoom polling is going to do. But one thing to watch out for, though, is that Zoom polling is really only good for your most basic questions, like your yes, no, and whatnot. If you have advanced needs, you're going to need to probably use like a third party polling feature, like an election buddy or whatnot, and do your sort of voting by that software. Because like many associations, for example, have weighted voting where your vote might be weighed higher than someone else's vote if you have a bigger condo unit, and Zoom polling does not support features like that. Or remember in the example of we had lots of maybe people, spouse one and spouse two, sharing the same computer, they can only cast one vote, right? And so if you had their email separately, if you use a third-party system, you could actually send them a separate email to cast their ballots. And so little cases like that, if it's something that's beyond your basic questions, you probably need to use another form of voting, another software for voting, like an election buddy. But Zoom can handle your basic questions built in already. Um, Something to watch out for when you're doing your electronic voting, though, is thresholds if someone wants to try to invalidate your voting. And so Section 23 in Roberts deals with points of order. And within those points of order, it talks about things like people being denied the right to vote or non-members voting or people casting multiple votes, right? The same thing can happen during an electronic meeting. And so if you look at that section, it talks about the timing of when you can make your point of order. And so if there's a possibility that the outcome would have been affected, you have to declare the vote invalid, right? So like let's say let's say it was 8 yeses and 7 nos, right? But there was one person participating like with their spouse, but they didn't have the right, they couldn't vote because they were sharing the computer. They could validly raise a point of order by saying like, well, I was denied my right to vote and I could have affected the result because my eighth vote or my 16th vote in that instance could have tied it and the motion would have lost, right? And so that would have been a valid point of order. So because of this, that's why in the special rules of order, I really recommend that you make it clear of what is required to participate in your electronic meetings, right? Like I would put it in there like clearly that like if you're dialed in by phone, like you count for quorum, but like you might not be able to like do all your voting and whatnot. Full access to the meeting is logging into the Zoom link on the Zoom app. Those sort of things, right? In order to just really have clear, cut, distinct lines, because what you don't want is to have certain things like overturned over technicalities, right? When you're on the same page about what it truly means to be meeting electronically. And at the NAP convention, we actually had put something like this in the standing rules, in the convention standing rules. Well, we weren't in 2023, we weren't meeting electronically, but we were using electronic voting software. And so to sort of simplify those whole paragraphs in the point of order section, we just said basically that you can't declare a vote invalid due to user error or a technical or operating issue unless the number of delegates affected by that error could have affected the outcome of the vote. And so what we did was we put that in there to pretty much simplify it and to say what the principle is. Because if you go back to the previous section, there's like a lot of like, if it depends on timing and it was this and it was that, right? This is the rule that we use to supersede the point of order section in Robert's Rules of Order. And that was key because again, at the end of the day, like if this is an issue affecting only one person, but it was like, a 20 vote difference, right? Like we don't need to spend time to redo our meeting vote and everything if that one vote difference is not going to impact the 20 vote threshold, right? Because again, uh, yeah, because Robert says in that second bullet says, right, that if it wouldn't have had an impact, you still could raise a point of order if it was raised immediately. So we just said, no, 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 no. The general rule is if there's no impact, it's a sorry, but we're going to move on. So kind of keep that in mind for your special rules. And before we set up our accounts and everything, or show you how to set up a meeting and Zoom and everything, here's some advanced options. If you have like presentations, uh, like a panel or only officers are like presenting like an annual report and things like that, you can click next to their name in the camera menu and pin their cameras for everyone. And this makes their cameras the main focus in that gray staging area. That's really good for presentations and whatnot. Next, you can set up breakout rooms in your Zoom meeting, and that's really great for things like executive session or excluding non-voting attendees. And so, for example, at the VSAP convention, we actually ended up doing that because at a convention you have your voting delegates, right? But then you have your other non-voting attendees. Well, there was a question that only voting delegates needed to vote on. And so what we did was we put everyone who was not a voting delegate, we put them into a separate breakout room so that we could only, so people left in the main room were only delegates. So when they voted on the Zoom poll, it only counted their votes because people in breakout rooms can't vote in the main room Zoom poll. And so we did that in order to capture what the true vote is, right? Versus having non-delegates accidentally, for example, vote in a vote and impact the result. Same principle can be used for executive session or closed portions of meetings. You can put those people into a breakout room who aren't supposed to be a witness of what's happening at that meeting at that time. There's also like a live streaming option, which is great for if you have like a large non-member audience. Like let's say, for example, we have 80 voting members, but we have lots of people who are non-voting members who want to like witness what's going on. You're able to, in your Zoom session, set it up to where it can live stream to your Facebook page, like a YouTube page. You can give those non-voting attendees a YouTube link, right? And then they can watch everything that's happening in the meeting on the YouTube, whereas people who are in the meeting in the Zoom are the only ones who can actually like debate and vote and have their motions and do the polling and whatnot. But you can have the shared link for other people to at least witness the meeting. And in addition, there's also closed captions that you can enable, which is really good for reasonable accommodations or people who just want to be able to see what's kind of being said across the screen. Okay, so now let's set up a meeting. I'm going to go back. And so there's two components to the Zoom app. There's like the main app, but then there's the back end, I like to call it, which is the website, zoom.us. And again, that's zoom.us. And it's important that whoever has the Zoom account, the Zoom login, you need to make sure they have login access to the zoom.us, because this is where you will actually set up different options for your meeting, right? I've been in a meeting where no one knew what the password was, and because it did not turn on the polling, like they had to do a roll call vote for 60 people, like one by one, to get what the final result was going to be, because the polling was not going to be reliable enough for those purposes. And so that's why, as a parliamentarian, you have a client, always double check what your Zoom settings are and what they're going to say. But I'm on, again, zoom.us, and I'm logged in, and then under meetings, I might set up a little meeting, right? So I can go here, I can say schedule a meeting. That's what I did earlier today, for BOD. So I can just give it a title, right? Let's see, like, and then you're going to be picking your date and your time of your meeting. And another option that you can do is you can have it be a recurring meeting. And when it's a recurring meeting, that means you can reuse the same link more than once. And so, like, I could have it repeat, like maybe we meet monthly on the first Sunday of the month or whatever, for example, right? And you want to repeat, we want to do it for 12 times for like the rest of the year, for example. I guess it's 11 if we do from February. You can kind of have that set up like that, or you can have it set up to where it's just one link for one meeting. Another option on here too is no fixed time, which means it's just a live link, and it just, whenever people are in it, you could be in it, and you can kind of launch your meeting from that same link, right? So a little bit less secure, because you're kind of reusing that same link, but regardless, you're able to, that could be a ease of option if people have issues figuring out like what the link is. I'm just gonna make this a one-time meeting. And then you can turn registration on or off. I'll turn it on for this example. So what that means is when you do registration, you can request information like names, emails, um, questions, like things like that, right? And it'll actually send when someone registers, it'll actually send them a personalized link. That's only for them because they registered for the meeting. That's really great for like tracking attendance or tracking guests who might attend your meeting, so you have their emails, you can follow up with them like later on and the like. So that's a possibility that you can turn on registration, and I'll show you what that menu looks like in the next screen. You can also turn on a waiting room, which means that if you're not the host, people are kind of be waiting in that waiting room until the host like lets them join the meeting. And then for your audio options, you have telephone only, computer only, or you can do both. I normally do both, give people that option. And under other options, you want to hit the show button. And something that's important that you might want to click on is allow participants to join anytime. And so what that means is, so by the default setting is your host has to join the meeting first in order to start it, and then other people can like join the meeting, right? Whereas if you click that button, that allows people to join the meeting without the host being there, without the account owner being there. Um, and so when you do it that way, like let's say your account owner is sick or they can't like attend the meeting, that allows everyone else to kind of still hold your meeting without having the host be there or the account owner be there first. And so that's something that you can definitely do. You have to click that button, allow participants to join at any time. I'm going to click save, and then I'll show you a couple of things. So this is the meeting now that we have open, right? If I go to registration, I can actually edit the questions. I can like edit the questions that people get asked like when they register for the meeting. Like again, if I want to ask for their phone number and whatnot, so I can have follow-up, you can do that because instead what's going to happen is instead of like a direct link to the meeting, it's going to instead create a page, like I said, where they're going to register with their name and whatever their email address might be. Something I'm going to point out over here is like polls and quizzes. And so if you kind of already have an idea of what might be coming up at that meeting and you want to do a Zoom poll for a vote, you're able to kind of set it up in advance already, right? And so if I know we're going to have like a yes/no motion, I might have this underpinning question, right? And allow people to know, to be able to pick yes or no when the chair puts the question on something. Something to watch out for is if you're going to do like a secret ballot vote, like on an election, for example, and I think I have a sample one of those here. Um, it says sample officer election. I think that's the one. Yeah, so president for Mickey Mouse, Donald Duck, et cetera, right? If you want it to be a secret ballot vote, you have to click this little gear icon, and then you have to say require answers to be anonymous. Because if you don't have that, then someone can actually the helps can run an admin report and see how you voted on something. And so, when you're in a Zoom meeting and you're doing the Zoom polling, and you want to make sure that it's anonymous, like you need to raise the point and ask them to log into the back end and show me where you have it set that it's going to be anonymous, right? And that's the only check that you have because Zoom doesn't really let you know otherwise if it's going to be like anonymous. And so that's something that you might have to do in order to make sure you're guaranteed that you have a secret vote. But something else I want to point out is sometimes you're in a Zoom meeting or you have a Zoom account and it's like, I don't see the breakout rooms or I don't see the polling or I can't add a co-host, right? You might have to actually enable that in the back end first so then that you can do it in your app, right? So this is something you have to do only one time, but then once you enable it in the back end, all your meetings in the future will have that option. And so it's under two settings. One, there's like settings, which is like the user level setting, but then there's the admin level setting, which is going to be under account management and then account settings. So yeah, under account settings, we're under the meeting one, right? This is where you're going to be having in your different account level settings for your organization. Um, which is I want people joining my phone to have a password, or I could make a password have a certain like length if I wanted to, right? For different security settings. Scrolling down, I'm trying to find the ones that are most relevant to what we were talking about. Yeah, so see, now we're at the end meeting, right? And so, co-host, right? I want to have that enabled. I want to have meeting polls and I want that enabled, right? If you want to send files via the chat, like I can send you the draft minutes in the chat, I can have that enabled. Screen sharing, you want that turned on, right? You can you can have only selected reactions, or you can have all the emojis available. In meeting advanced settings, breakout rooms, turn those on, etc. Right? And so once you kind of make sure you have those turned on and your back end, then in your main Zoom, it's going to actually be there nice and set up for you. So that's something that you might have to do in order to make sure in order to make sure that you have all your full options available to you. Yeah, I'm gonna point this out one more time just to make sure. So when you set up your meeting here on Zoom.us, the link is going to be right here. It says meeting link, registration link. That's the link that you're going to provide to people right there for your meeting. So some miscellaneous tips and tricks. Good lighting and a virtual background go a long way. I like using virtual background because my bedroom is a little messy sometimes, and I access my computer from my bedroom. Um, and for lighting, I just use a desk lamp. And what it does is it's the desk lamp is not on me directly. It's actually facing against the wall, and then the light's bouncing off the wall onto me. The main lighting issue you might run into is if you have like a window behind you, because then the camera's going to focus on the light coming in from behind you. It's going to like darken your face because it's focusing on the light behind you. And so that's the main thing. If you need to probably get like blinds or whatnot, or not, curtains or whatnot, or focus yourself that you are not directly in front of a window that's behind you. Um, we just talked about this, but if you select an option that allows people to join your meeting at any time, that bypass the need for your account holder to have to join the meeting first. And so that's really important for groups that might not need all that extra security, like your local parliamentary groups. That sort of thing is definitely fine. Um, when you are a parliamentarian serving a client, you really need to check the Zoom settings with them. And when I say the Zoom settings, I mean Zoom.us, like the website, not like on the app, right? Because you need to make sure these things are turned on, because what you don't want to happen is what happened to one of my clients, which was, oh yeah, we have the polling turned on, but they really didn't. And then we had to do a roll call vote and go person by person by person. And so had we just taken the extra 5 minutes beforehand to kind of go through their settings, they would have been A-OK, and I could have saved them a lot of time in their meeting. And also, just depending on your technology skills, you may need to have a separate person be your Zoom host. So people can focus on doing what their other jobs maybe. I'm very comfortable with the technology, so I'm okay with presiding and also managing the Zoom as well too, but not everyone is. But when you have that in mind, remember, if you are a host and you launch the poll, the host can't vote in the poll, and so depending on how that goes, you might need to keep track of who can't vote in the poll, and then if the result's going to be close enough, then again, that might be that point of order or other thing that you might have to redo it so they're able to add their votes in, right? Okay, and that is all I have for you question-wise, but this was wonderful for me to be able to kind of re-record this. But again, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact me. I'm glad I was able to kind of go through this one more time and provide this as a resource for you in order to kind of go back and review anything you need to review when it comes to setting up your meetings in Zoom. But thank you so much for attending this webinar. And if you have any questions, my email will be in the video comment section.